Hey guys, how you doing? I hope you guys are doing well. I hope that you guys are not going stir crazy during this time of coronavirus quarantine. I know that we are. I had to leave today to go home for a little bit because my kids were wrecking the place. The baby had permanent markers on the walls. My kids were trying to make milkshakes with the blender. Let's just say it was an ocean of chocolate milk, Nerf darts, and Connect 4 pieces. It was crazy. So that's kind of just a normal day in the life of the Rogers family. I hope you guys are having a little less chaos than we are, but nevertheless, we're making it. We're staying healthy. I hope you guys are doing well and staying healthy as well. And I'm excited to get to connect with you guys again. I was just thinking about it this week about how it's neat that we get to stay in contact in a way that is, it's not what we are normally used to, but it's something that, if we miss a week, we can go back and watch it. We can watch it again and again. We have this opportunity to put stuff on the internet, which is pretty cool. So thank you, Al Gore, for the internet. All right, so this week we're going to continue our talk about Jesus and the 7 I am statements he made in the Gospel of John. Man, this is a book full of powerful statements from Jesus. Jesus always had the best statements in the entire Bible. He, being God, was perfect, obviously, but it's just some of the things he said, you're just like, wow. I think about how it must have just been so crazy for his disciples and the people that were living in his day to experience these things he said. And, we're living in a time where there's unprecedented things happening. And I think that just like it's unprecedented that the government would shut everything down, that we're all staying home, how crazy this is, it's even more crazy the stuff that God did and God is doing still. And so let's be reminded that even though it's crazy out there, God is at work and he is doing some incredible stuff. And his plans are good, and we should look forward to what those plans are. So this morning, we're going to talk about Jesus saying, I am the resurrection and the life. Now we've kind of talked about Jesus being a door. We've talked about him being the good shepherd. We've talked about him being the light of the world. Well, Jesus, this is probably one of the best I am statements I think he made, just talking about how he is our resurrection and life. Like, where would we be without Jesus' resurrection? We would be nowhere. It would be just us trying to do the things that we are trying to make ourselves feel better about our lives, but ultimately it's meaningless because there's no afterlife. Well, we believe in a God who says that there is a heaven and an earth that he's going to make, and he's going to give us new bodies, and we're going to live with him forever. So the fact that Jesus says, I am the resurrection of life, is very meaningful. I'm going to read like 44 verses to you. It's kind of going to be a lot, but I want to read this whole story because it's really incredible. And I want you to think about what Jesus is saying as I'm reading this, because it speaks for itself. It is an amazing, amazing story. And I think that if we look at this story, it's like all we can see is the hope from the Lord. Because God takes our paradigms, he takes the things that we think are normal, and he just blows those things out of the water sometimes. And this is one of those moments. And so I'm going to read from John chapter 11, and I'm going to start right at verse 1, and we're going to read all the way through verse 44, so you can follow along with me. If you have ADD, you could pause this video, read it yourself, and then skip ahead. But I'll read that for you right now. John 11:1. It says, now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus, of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Now remember, Mary and Martha, we've heard about these two sisters in the Gospels already, good friends of Jesus, and Jesus had spent time in their home teaching there. And that's kind of that familiar story where we see Martha, she's super busy trying to keep everything hospitable, and she gets kind of upset that her sister Mary is actually just sitting at the feet of Jesus learning versus helping to keep the house, clean, and she's cooking for everybody, and she's, Martha's just doing as much as she can to be hospitable, but Mary makes the better choice of sitting at the feet of Jesus and just listening. And we have this interaction with her. Well, now we have another interaction. Their brother Lazarus, who Jesus definitely would have been in very good relationship with, has died or is dying. And so that's where we're at. It says that on verse 2, it says, "And it was Mary who anointed the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. The sisters therefore sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified in it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister, and Lazarus. And when therefore he heard that he was sick, he stayed then 2 days longer in the place when he was. So Jesus didn't hurry about his way to get there as soon as possible. It says he waited for an additional 2 days once he heard what was going on. Verse 7, "Then after this, he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you are going to go there again? And Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. But if anyone who walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." Then he said, after that, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go that I may waken him out of his sleep." The disciples therefore said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." Verse 13, "Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he was talking about literally asleep." So the disciples thought Jesus was talking about him literally being asleep, not just being physically, not being dead, but being just like taking a nap. And Jesus therefore said to them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sake that I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." So Jesus is basically saying, you know what? He died. And it's actually good for you that he died and I wasn't there to save him. Now, if you're one of Jesus' disciples in this moment, you might be thinking, well, that's kind of rough. Like, we don't want to be glad that somebody died. Like, we could have, especially if we could have been there to do something. The disciples hadn't seen anybody be they're basically in this moment where they, somebody's dying. Like, you just don't see people get raised from the dead. That doesn't just happen all the time. And so, this sense of urgency, you'd think of somebody on their deathbed, you'd want to get there. And so the fact that they misjudged what he was saying, it makes sense, because if you know that somebody's really, really sick, what do? Well, you go and you find them and you're with them in those last moments. But Jesus, it says he waited 2 days. And then they got news that he had died. So when Jesus came, verse 17, he found that he had already been in the tomb for 4 days. So Lazarus died, and they buried him, and it's 4 days. Think about that, 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console in concerning their brother. Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went to meet him, and Mary still sat at his house. Now listen to this. Martha, therefore, said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." She recognized that Jesus' power. She says, he would not have died. "And even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother shall rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." And Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life." I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus making a statement, I am the resurrection and the life. "He who believes in me shall live even if he dies. and everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world." And when she said this, she went away and called her sister Mary, and saying secretly, "The teacher is here, and he's calling for you." And when she heard it, she arose quickly, and when coming home, and was coming to him, and Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in a place where Martha met him. And the Jews then, who were with her in her house, were consoling her, when they saw that Mary rose up and quickly went out, followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him and fell at his feet, saying, "Lord, if you had not been here, my brother would not have died." And when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit, and was troubled, and said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." And it says that Jesus wept. And so the Jews were saying, "Behold, he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not this man who opened the eyes and healed the blind have kept this man from dying?" And Jesus therefore, again being deeply moved, came to the tomb. And now it was a cave, and a stone had been laid against it. And Jesus said, "Remove the stone." Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, "Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he has been dead for 4 days." And Jesus said to her, Did I not say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And so they removed the stone, and Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. I know thou hears me always. But because of the people are standing, I say it, that they may believe that thou did send me." And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." Verse 44, he who had died came forth, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him, let him go." We'll stop right there. Jesus waited for Lazarus to die. And there's no doubt that Jesus could have healed him if he would have shown up on time. And this was a big hang-up for the disciples and for Mary and Martha. They knew that Jesus could do it. But when Jesus showed up and asked them to move the stone, they were like, "What are you talking about? He's been dead for 4 days. It's going to reek in there." Can you imagine going to a funeral and somebody standing up out of the crowd, like one of the friends of the family, and saying, "Open up the casket. Open it up." And the family member, everybody's like kind of feeling really awkward now, like those funerals you go to when they have the open mic and people start saying things maybe the family didn't expect them to say, and then now things got really awkward. Well, this is awkward when somebody says, "Hey, open up his tomb. Open it up." Jesus had the audacity to stand up and ask him to open the tomb. And so they did. They opened it up. And then he calls forth to Lazarus, and Lazarus comes out. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. That's amazing. Death doesn't have power over Jesus. Another thing I think is really amazing about this particular instance is the fact that it says that Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Jesus rose on the 3rd day. Jesus was showing his disciples that people could be risen from the dead. Lazarus was in the grave longer than Jesus was. Yet, when Jesus went to the cross, the disciples still lacked the faith to believe that he could be risen again. Jesus, all throughout the Gospels, is prepping his disciples for what's coming up, what's coming ahead. And God has the power to even bring the dead to life. Now, Jesus, obviously talking about resurrection and life, it's more than just one physical life here on the earth that he brought back. Because eventually Lazarus died again down the road, right? But the resurrection and the life that God really wants us to focus on is the fact that when we die, that it's not done. It's not pointless. It's not just at the end, and hopefully you had a good life. God wants to resurrect his church, his people, into new life with Jesus forever. And that's amazing. And God's not afraid if he offends anybody doing it. Jesus literally asked sisters of the deceased to open up his tomb, and then had the audacity to call him back to life. And that God, that Jesus, that's the Jesus we serve. And he's powerful. He died and he rose again. And the Bible says that because he died and rose again, we will rise again. That without Jesus' resurrection, we could not be resurrected. We needed Jesus to die and to defeat death. And that's amazing. I hope you guys feel encouraged by that we serve a Jesus who is the resurrection, who is the life. You know, next week we're going to talk about another I am of Jesus. It's very close to this one. But I mean, I can feel encouraged by that. I hope you can too. God is at work in our country and in our city. And even when it looks so dark out there, remember that Mary and Martha thought it was dark too. Their brother had died. And then Jesus showed up and rose them from the dead. Like when God just shows up at your door, like you kind of like gripping the edge of your seat, because who knows what kind of tricks God's going to pull out and do. You know, God wants to blow our minds. And he's looking to use his people. And that's you. All right. 2 quick things from my office that I think you guys would think are cool. This right here. This is a thing from a company called Kirkland. You wind it up. It's like an old wine toy, and it shoots sparks. It's pretty sweet. I found this at Goodwill in the kids section. The little toy package said 14 and up, so I think it was a little bit misplaced, but pretty sweet. I don't remember if I showed you guys this, but this is pretty sweet. I found this at Goodwill. It's a lot of fun. All right. It's my lightsaber. It's pretty sweet. I made it at Disney World. It's made out of metal, which is kind of fun. It's got like this like belt loop thing. You can take the lightsaber blade off, and you can put it back in and stuff. And I have like a red crystal too, so I can make it red. Right now it's like yellow. It's pretty dope. It all comes apart. And you can take it all apart, and it's pretty sweet. So anyway, I love Star Wars. I have a whole bunch of stuff up there, right there, that is made out of Star Wars stuff. And so I also have something pretty cool that's on the other shelf over there, but I'll show you guys that next week. But hey, love you guys. So tonight, one announcement. Tonight at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, we're starting to do Zoom live streams, and you guys are all invited. Again, send me your numbers or your email addresses to brant@therivercenter.net. That's BRANT@therivercenter.net, so I can get you guys on these Zoom meetings every Thursday night at 6:30. We're going to get together and just hang out and see how each other's doing, pray for each other. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys tonight and talking to you all again. So hope you guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.